Welcome to the Deeper Thinking podcast. The first thing that changes is not what people do, it is what they begin preparing themselves to feel. He notices this one morning before the alarm finishes sounding. The room is still dark enough that the furniture appears unfinished, as though the bed, the chair, the half-open wardrobe have not yet fully agreed to become part of the day. Somewhere behind the wall, heating pipes click once, then stop. Outside, a delivery truck reverses through wet streets, its warning tone repeating with the patience of something that has no interest in whether anyone is awake. His hand is already moving toward the phone. Thought arrives later. There is no emergency waiting for him, no crisis, no message that would justify the speed of the gesture. A weather notification, 2 unread emails, a calendar reminder for the afternoon. 1 thumbs-up reaction sent hours earlier by someone who may have been half asleep when they sent it. Nothing has happened. Still, his body has begun preparing. The screen brightens his face before his eyes fully focus. He checks the weather, closes it, opens it again without remembering the first time. Tomorrow's forecast appears more important than today's. He opens 1 email, reads the first 2 lines, closes it halfway through, then opens the calendar and stares at a meeting title long enough for the words to lose their ordinary meaning. The truck outside stops reversing. For several seconds, the apartment becomes still. He remains lying there, phone in hand. Not resting exactly. Not working either. More like entering the day before the day has properly arrived. More like arranging himself around something still approaching. This is increasingly how power enters ordinary life. Not always as an order, not always as supervision, not always as some visible demand arriving from outside the body. More often it begins earlier than command, so in the slight tightening before the message is opened, in the emotional rehearsal before the conversation occurs, in the calendar checked before the feet touch the floor. The strange thing is that none of this has to feel oppressive. It can feel responsible, it can feel intimate, it can feel like competence. A person who checks tomorrow's schedule before getting out of bed may simply think they are organised. Someone rehearsing the tone of a reply may experience the rehearsal as care. Someone preparing for evaluation before evaluation appears may never notice that preparation itself has become the atmosphere of the day. Not all exhaustion announces itself as pressure. Sometimes it arrives disguised as readiness. Older forms of discipline often revealed themselves through interruption. Whistles, clocks, supervisors, doors that opened or closed at fixed times. Authority came from elsewhere, with enough force to be recognised as authority. Anticipation works differently. It does not need to interrupt the body once it has taught the body to interrupt itself. The future begins before events do. But not clearly. That matters. People prepare for disasters that never arrive while missing the quieter changes already taking hold around them. Someone rehearses a difficult conversation for 3 days, then forgets every careful sentence when the moment comes. A father checks severe weather warnings 6 times while failing to notice the exhaustion settling across the kitchen table. An institution spends years optimizing against imagined risk, then collapses through ordinary confusion, delay, and missed responsibility. Preparation does not always make the future more legible. Sometimes it teaches people to look past what is already happening. And not everyone is asked to prepare for the same future. That is where the condition becomes harder to describe honestly. For some people, the future appears as a field of choices, courses to compare, investments to adjust, careers to optimize, bodies to improve, homes to protect, children to position early enough that later life seems less exposed to chance. For others, the future arrives as penalty. A delivery rider calculates whether tonight's fuel costs will erase the week's earnings before the shift has properly begun. A tenant checks the repair request again, not because the wording has changed, but because the room is cold and the landlord has not answered for 3 weeks. A cleaner watches the last bus time move closer while wiping tables beside people discussing long-term strategy. Some people prepare because possibility expands before them. Some prepare because one mistake may narrow everything. Some stop preparing because the future has become too humiliating to rehearse. This is why the language of readiness is never neutral. It does not fall evenly across lives. A corporate strategist can call anticipation foresight. A parent waiting for a medical result may call it care. Someone working 3 insecure jobs may not call it anything at all. There may be no reflective distance left, only sequencing. Bus. Shift. Payment. Food. Sleep. Bus again. The same historical moment gives different people different distances from tomorrow. That sentence sounds abstract until ordinary life begins rearranging itself around it. A woman sits alone in a parked car outside a grocery store, rewriting a message she has already composed twice. She is not changing the meaning much. Mostly she is adjusting the temperature of herself. Too distant, too eager, too cold, too apologetic. Too much explanation for something that should have taken 1 sentence. Then she deletes the whole thing accidentally. For several seconds she looks at the empty screen. Outside, a shopping trolley rolls slowly across the car park because somebody failed to return it properly. It bumps against the wheel stop, turns slightly, then rests at an angle. A fluorescent light above the concrete ceiling flickers without failing. Somewhere behind her, automatic doors open and close for people carrying bags into rain. She writes the message again, shorter this time. By the time she sends it, the conversation has already happened inside her several times. Across the city, someone else forgets to respond entirely. The unopened message sinks lower through the day, then into the next day, then the next. Silence becomes harder to interrupt than the original conversation would have been. Weeks later, the person still rereads the notification preview without opening the thread fully, not avoiding it exactly, more like orbiting it. Elsewhere, a student refreshes a submission portal that still displays the same sentence. A man waiting for medical results reorganises 6 possible futures around a phone call no doctor has made yet. Parents rehearse difficult conversations while washing dishes. Workers compose tomorrow's explanations during tonight's commute. Meanwhile, someone spends 40 minutes watching videos of strangers repairing cracked concrete online while forgetting the deadline supposedly ruining their life. Anticipation does not produce clean subjects, it produces fragments. A woman meal preps 6 days ahead, then discovers expired milk she meant to throw out last week. Someone spends an hour colour-coding calendar events before missing the dentist appointment, written in the middle of the screen. A man keeps reopening a budgeting spreadsheet while ordering takeaway he cannot comfortably afford. Preparation does not always become competence. Often, it becomes another place where life splits. The body begins synchronizing itself to futures still under construction, but the synchronization is uneven. Some people are pulled forward by opportunity, some by fear, some by care, some by debt, some by shame. Some drift in and out of readiness unpredictably, intensely prepared for one kind of consequence, strangely absent before another. And because these gestures often look prudent, caring, productive, emotionally intelligent, or professionally necessary, the mechanism hides inside behaviours no one wants to condemn. A quick reply, a careful tone, a checked balance, a refreshed portal, a second alarm, a sentence softened before it is sent. No single action proves anything. Together, they begin teaching the present to behave as if it is already late. This is why simple critiques fail. A system cannot survive through suffering alone. People must receive something from the arrangement that exhausts them. Some small confirmation, some proof of usefulness, some temporary relief from instability, some feeling that vigilance is not merely vigilance, but care given the only way available. Anticipation offers many rewards. Readiness can calm the body for a while. Optimization can make uncertainty feel smaller. Preparation can create the sensation of moral seriousness. The person who remains continuously available to future demands may not experience themselves as controlled. They may experience themselves as dependable. Even anxiety begins disguising itself as love. Someone refreshing a child's school portal throughout the afternoon may not feel trapped inside surveillance. They may feel close to the child who is elsewhere. Someone monitoring work messages after dinner may not think of the action as obedience. They may think of it as protecting a job that protects rent, food, school shoes, medication, the fragile architecture of ordinary life. Someone rewriting a message 5 times may not experience the exhaustion as fear. They may experience it as the wish not to harm another person carelessly. The mechanism becomes difficult to resist because it attaches itself to the best parts of people. responsibility, tenderness, attention, competence, the wish to be there when needed. The body learns to confuse preparedness with virtue. At first, this still appears situational. A result is pending, a meeting is approaching, a child is late, a storm warning has been issued. Preparation seems tied to something specific enough to justify itself. But gradually the object becomes less necessary. A person once prepared for events. He notices this one afternoon while standing in line for coffee. Nothing unusual is happening. The cafe is loud in the ordinary way cafes are loud now. Cups strike counters, milk steams, conversations overlap without forming one shared room. Yet everyone near him appears partly elsewhere. A woman scrolls through airline updates while answering a question from the person beside her. A man wearing headphones opens a finance application, closes it, opens it again, makes no transaction. Another customer checks the time every few minutes, although he does not appear late. Behind the counter, a staff member wipes the same patch of surface twice because she has forgotten the first time. Nobody is fully absent. Nobody is fully present either. Near the window, an older man sits beside an untouched coffee for nearly 15 minutes without checking anything once. He does not seem peaceful exactly. Perhaps he is tired. Perhaps he is waiting for something too private to display. A teenager nearby laughs suddenly at something on her phone, loudly enough that several people glance toward her, then return almost instantly to their own separate futures. A notification sounds. One worker reaches toward his laptop bag before realizing the sound came from someone else's device. His hand stays on the zip a few seconds longer than necessary. The gesture is almost nothing. That is why it matters. The future leaks backward through actions too small to defend against. A hand moves, a screen wakes, a tone is checked, a thought leaves the room before the body does. No command has been issued, no supervisor has appeared, yet attention has already reorganized itself around possible demand. For long stretches now, life does not feel arranged around events. It feels arranged around readiness for events, around preserving emotional access to whatever might arrive next, around keeping some part of the self permanently available to interruption. This changes rest most quietly. A person sits on a couch at night watching television while also monitoring messages, package tracking, tomorrow's weather, unread emails, family chats, calendar reminders, school updates, bank alerts. Nothing dramatic happens. The evening continues. The body appears still. Then the internet fails for 20 minutes. The screen buffers. Messages stop arriving. Weather data disappears. The apartment becomes strangely quiet. For several minutes the person keeps checking anyway, as though the hand has not yet received the news that there is nothing to refresh. At first the silence feels irritating, then embarrassing, then almost physical. Downstairs someone shouts in the street about football results completely unrelated to any of this. A bottle breaks somewhere nearby. A car alarm begins and continues too long. Nobody comes immediately to stop it. The frozen screen remains paused halfway through somebody else's sentence. Not every contradiction becomes profound. Some simply accumulate. The future does not always arrive with philosophical elegance either. Sometimes it arrives as procedural junk accumulating around exhausted people, a reminder set for a task already completed. A browser tab left open for 4 days because closing it feels like forgetting something. A password reset email buried beneath 5 promotional offers and 1 message that might matter later. A half-written reply reopened without any new sentence appearing. No individual gesture seems important. That is how the arrangement protects itself. A quick check before bed, a backup plan, an early arrival, a second alarm, a document renamed before anyone asks for it. A sentence softened before it risks being misunderstood. Each action remains small enough to defend. Each can be explained as care, prudence, professionalism, or ordinary adult competence. Together they begin changing what time feels like. The present stops arriving as a place. It becomes a staging area. This becomes visible first in language. People increasingly apologize before asking for anything. Messages arrive padded by cushions built to absorb reactions that have not yet occurred. Hope this is okay. Sorry to bother you. No pressure. Totally understand if not. The request itself appears only after the emotional weather around it has been managed in advance. Even ordinary speech begins carrying a small risk department inside it. The sender writes not only to say something, but to prepare for how the saying might be received, forwarded, ignored, judged, misunderstood, screenshotted, remembered. Language learns to flinch early. Someone standing on a train platform removes his phone from his pocket again, though nothing meaningful could have changed in the previous 30 seconds. He does not unlock it immediately, he simply holds it, as though holding the device keeps him connected to a future that might punish him for being unreachable. Nearby, a woman rereads a calendar invitation for an appointment she already accepted. The location has not changed, the time has not changed. Still, she checks the map, then the travel time, then the weather, then the appointment again. The train application shows 3 different arrival times at once. Everyone continues looking at it anyway. This is not because systems have become perfectly controlling. Often it is because they have become unreliable. Flights change, rosters shift, platforms update silently, institutions contradict themselves, advice reverses, forms fail to save, portals time out, messages disappear into folders nobody checks. The person learns to prepare not because the world is legible, but because it is not. Readiness becomes a way of standing near instability without admitting how little can be secured. Someone opens a laptop during dinner, not because there is work to do exactly, but because unread possibility has become difficult to tolerate. Someone else misses 3 important emails after muting notifications for 1 hour and forgetting to turn them back on. A student saves the same document in 4 places and still submits the wrong version. Preparation does not end uncertainty. It gives uncertainty more surfaces to occupy. And once enough of life is organised this way, even identity begins forming under anticipated observation. The self becomes partly assembled for future judgment. How should this be documented? Will this matter later? Should this become evidence? Should this become content? Will this affect opportunity? What version of me is this moment preparing? A child learns to smile for the photograph before understanding why the photograph matters. A worker learns to sound calm in writing before feeling calm anywhere. A friend learns to phrase disappointment as though submitting it for review. The future has entered the sentence before the sentence has begun. The scanner never entirely disappears now. Not the literal scanner necessarily, though sometimes that too. Warehouse scanners, checkout scanners, delivery scanners, access gates, productivity dashboards, sleep trackers, fitness metrics, read receipts, school portals, engagement analytics. Each one appears specific enough to seem harmless. Each belongs to a different room, a different task, a different justification, but after a while another scanner forms beneath them. Not an object. An orientation, a way of asking, before anyone else asks, whether enough preparation has occurred. Did you respond quickly enough? Did you optimize sufficiently? Did you prepare responsibly? Did you anticipate the consequences? Did you remain available? Did you fall behind? The questions repeat before any explicit authority speaks. They appear while brushing teeth, waiting for a lift, standing beside a microwave, unlocking a car, walking from one room to another and forgetting why the movement began. No one has accused the person of failure. No one has issued a warning, yet the body conducts its own audit anyway. For some people, the scanner measures reputation. A lawyer checks unread emails beside a hotel pool, unable to remain fully inside leisure because professional absence still feels visible. A consultant rereads a message sent yesterday, not because the wording can be changed, but because the imagined judgment attached to it has not finished moving through the body. For others, the scanner measures survival. A migrant worker checks a bank balance beside a crowded train platform, calculating whether enough money remains after rent to send something home. A casual worker keeps refreshing a roster that may decide whether groceries become possible next week. A tenant rereads an unanswered repair request while cold air moves under the door. Someone else stops checking altogether. After months of rejected applications, anticipation begins to feel humiliating. Hope becomes another form of exposure. The inbox remains unopened, not because it contains nothing important, but because opening it requires a version of the future the person no longer knows how to perform. This is why refusal is never simple. Preparedness genuinely helps. Emotional foresight genuinely prevents harm. Planning can protect bodies, jobs, children, money, medication, shelter. A person checking weather updates before a child walks home is not merely captured by a system, they're caring for someone. A worker remaining reachable after hours may not be performing false devotion. They may be frightened by how thin the margin has become. The same gesture can be love and injury. The same readiness can protect life and drain it. The same preparation can create stability while teaching the nervous system never to stand down. That is where power becomes difficult to locate. It is no longer only above the person, issuing commands from a visible height. It has entered the ordinary moral grammar of being good, careful, employable, loving, responsible, realistic. The scanner asks its questions quietly. Then the person answers by becoming available again. The contradiction deepens because availability rarely feels empty from the inside. People do not remain prepared only because they fear punishment. They remain prepared because preparation gives shape to attachment. A mother waiting for test results at a hospital reorganises whole futures in advance because not preparing feels like a betrayal of the person she loves. A son checks flight updates while his father is in surgery, not because the information changes anything medically, but because looking away feels too much like absence. A young graduate refreshes job applications each morning with a mixture of dread and faith. Every refresh wounds a little. Every refresh also preserves the possibility that the wound may become worthwhile. The future injures people before arrival, partly because possible futures remain necessary to love. Hope itself becomes a form of exposure. This is where contemporary power becomes difficult to map cleanly. Not because domination has disappeared, not because institutions have become gentler, but because governance increasingly works through the management of possibility. It does not merely tell people what to do. It teaches them which futures must remain emotionally open, which risks must be rehearsed, which versions of themselves must stay ready for evaluation. The body learns to live near futures that may never stabilize enough to arrive. He notices this most clearly on Sundays. Not during work itself, during the atmosphere before work, laundry running, meals prepared, bags reorganised, devices charging on kitchen counters, alarms checked twice, calendar reviewed again despite nothing changing since earlier in the afternoon. One sock remains missing from the washing load for reasons nobody investigates further. The apartment becomes quiet in a particular way. Sunday evenings become quiet now, not restful, staged. The week has not begun, but it has already entered the room. It sits inside folded shirts, lunch containers, school bags, unread messages, the low hum of the fridge, the light from a laptop left open on the table. People move around their homes as though preparing for weather that is not yet visible. Entire populations begin pre-living Monday before Monday exists. The future acquires procedural gravity, yet even this gravity is not shared evenly. In one cafe, a woman adjusts retirement projections 30 years ahead, while the cleaner wiping nearby tables checks the last bus home. A startup founder speaks loudly about scaling horizons while an exhausted nurse stares at cold coffee, calculating whether there is enough energy left to buy groceries after another overnight shift. Someone reviews mortgage options. Someone else checks whether a declined payment has reversed. The room contains several futures moving at different speeds. Some expansive, some narrowing, some already late, and still many people would resist describing themselves as governed. That resistance matters. It shows how deeply preparation has fused with identity. People derive dignity from being ready, competence from responsiveness, security from vigilance, intimacy from availability. The person who answers quickly may not simply fear disapproval. They may experience speed as evidence that they matter. Someone continuously updating plans may feel briefly stabilized by the belief that uncertainty can be managed if enough care is applied. Even exhaustion becomes interpretable as proof of commitment. Not all participation feels coerced. Sometimes people love the very mechanisms reorganizing them. That is why the emotional texture is so strange. Burnout coexists with stimulation. Vigilance coexists with tenderness. Exhaustion coexists with aspiration. People resent continuous availability while fearing the irrelevance that might follow if they became unavailable. The contradiction does not weaken the system. The contradiction sustains it. Yet contradictions also produce strange forms of resistance, often too small or confused to become political. People forget messages deliberately without admitting the deliberateness to themselves. They leave notifications unanswered longer than necessary. They miss updates accidentally on purpose. A worker stares out a train window for 20 minutes without absorbing a single productivity signal. Someone preparing obsessively for the future abandons an entire carefully managed schedule one afternoon and cannot explain why. Not all refusal is noble. Sometimes people simply become dull. Someone stops optimizing because they're tired of hearing themselves speak. Another leaves laundry half-folded for 6 days while continuing to answer work emails immediately. A man spends an hour comparing productivity systems online, then falls asleep in outdoor clothes on top of an unmade bed. One woman tracks hydration, sleep metrics, emotional boundaries, financial goals, and protein intake with careful discipline, while quietly drinking too much alone every Thursday night for reasons she cannot organize into language. The contemporary self is often less coherent than critique wants it to be. Contemporary society may be less coherent still. Elsewhere, someone working 3 insecure jobs no longer experiences burnout as a contradiction. There is no reflective distance left for that. Only sequencing, bus schedules, shift transitions, cheap food between movements. The language of optimization barely touches the texture of this exhaustion. Meanwhile, another person spends the weekend constructing an elaborate morning routine for a life materially stable enough to permit ritualized self-improvement in the first place. Both are living under the same historical weather. They are not living in the same future. This becomes visible in offices late at night, not during crisis, not during heroic labor, not even during work anyone will necessarily remember. A few people remain beneath fluorescent light adjusting a presentation scheduled for the next morning. One person changes a heading from key considerations to strategic priorities, then changes it back. Another aligns 3 icons by a few pixels. Someone rereads a sentence until it stops sounding like language and begins sounding like risk. Nobody says the work is pointless. That would be too easy. The presentation may matter. A decision may depend on it. A client may notice an error. A manager may remember who seemed prepared and who seemed careless. Each adjustment has a reason. Each carries a small trace of prudence. Still, the work is no longer only about the work. It is about the imagined room in which the work will be judged. The question that may come, the expression on someone's face, the email afterward, the future interpretation of a sentence already written. The document becomes a rehearsal space for possible accusation. By the time the meeting happens, part of it has already taken place in the bodies of the people preparing for it. They have already answered objections no one has raised, already softened claims no one has challenged, already removed sentences that might have revealed uncertainty too honestly. The future has edited the document before anyone in the future has seen it. This happens in relationships too. A person drafts an apology, not to clarify what they feel, but to survive every possible reading of the apology before it is sent. Another begins a difficult message with so much cushioning that the original hurt nearly disappears beneath politeness. Someone wants to write, "You hurt me," but writes, "I completely understand where you were coming from," then stares at the sentence with quiet resentment. Emotional life becomes pre-edited. Speech arrives managed in advance, softer than feeling, cleaner than anger, more acceptable than confusion. People become fluent in preventing misunderstandings that may never happen while losing the capacity to speak imperfectly to the person in front of them. The self begins to prepare for observation before it has fully arrived inside experience. That is the deeper shift. A moment is no longer only lived. It is quietly assessed for how it may appear later, how it might be remembered, how it might be documented, whether it could become evidence, profile, explanation, proof of care, proof of effort, proof of seriousness, proof that nothing was neglected. A child learns this before there are words for it. They learn to prepare faces for cameras before they understand memory. They learn that schoolwork may become evidence, sport may become profile, hobbies may become talent, personality may become future application material. A drawing is not only a drawing. A weekend is not only a weekend. A child standing in a kitchen while a parent films a small achievement begins to sense, long before they could explain it, That experience may need to be captured in order to fully count. A generation inherits readiness before adulthood, not because parents are cruel, often because parents are frightened. They know the world has become less forgiving. They know chances can appear early and close quickly. They know a future can be narrowed by missed forms, weak records, bad timing, wrong schools, invisible disadvantages, illness, debt, one unreturned email, one institution that does not care enough to correct its own mistake. So they prepare the child. The child learns preparation as atmosphere. What disappears gradually is not freedom exactly. That word is too large and too clean for the loss. What disappears is temporal arrival. The ability of a moment to be only itself. Exercise becomes health optimization. Friendship becomes network maintenance. Rest becomes recovery strategy. Sleep becomes performance infrastructure. Reading becomes development. Silence becomes mindfulness. Even doing nothing begins to require a name before it can be permitted. Life keeps converting itself into preparation for life, yet the conversion is never complete. Ordinary failure keeps breaking through the system's neatness. Someone opens a productivity application and forgets why before the screen finishes loading. A man spends 40 minutes organising tomorrow's schedule, then misses the appointment written in the middle of it. Parents document childhood continuously through phones and later find they remember the images more sharply than the afternoon itself. A worker rehearses a resignation conversation for months, then remains silent when the opportunity appears. A student prepares so carefully for an interview that every answer sounds borrowed. Someone arrives at a networking event on the wrong night. Someone saves the file perfectly and sends the wrong attachment. Someone practices being ready until the moment itself becomes impossible to enter. Preparation does not always produce competence. Sometimes it produces a life standing beside itself, waiting for the version that might be needed later. At other times, the arrangement collapses into procedural nonsense. A worker attends 3 consecutive meetings about improving communication while nobody says anything anyone can remember afterward. A university sends a wellness reminder at 2 in the morning. A delivery driver listens to a podcast about productivity while urinating beside a highway because there is no time left to stop properly. Someone spends half an hour choosing the perfect meditation application, then becomes irritated by the sound of breathing instructions. Not every contradiction becomes profound. Some simply accumulate. That matters because the system does not only exhaust people through intensity, it also exhausts them through clutter, through small unfinished loops that never quite become crisis and never quite disappear. A form half completed, a password reset postponed, a booking confirmation lost somewhere between inboxes, a policy update accepted without being read, a reminder dismissed then remembered too late, a message opened only far enough to become another thing requiring response. Nothing dramatic happens. The day becomes heavier anyway. The deeper tragedy is quieter than collapse. People begin losing access to experiences that are not already partially occupied by future management. Yet complete refusal is impossible. That must remain clear. The future really does matter. Preparation can protect people. Anticipation can prevent harm. Parents should prepare. Illness does require vigilance. Climate instability does demand foresight. Workers need income. Children need collecting. Forms need submitting. Some alarms should be set twice. The problem is not anticipation. The problem begins when readiness stops serving life and becomes the medium through which life is lived. When the nervous system remains permanently available to possible evaluation. When incompletion becomes atmospheric. When the present cannot fully gather itself before being converted into evidence, recovery, optimization, apology, planning, protection, or proof that nothing has been neglected. This is why contemporary exhaustion often feels so difficult to explain. Many people are tired before anything identifiable has happened, tired from maintaining readiness itself, from keeping channels open to possible interruption, from emotionally occupying futures that may not arrive, from preparing carefully enough that no preparation can ever feel complete. A person can wake already behind without being able to name what has gone wrong. The calendar is not impossible. The inbox is not catastrophic. The household is functioning. The work can probably be done. The child will probably be collected. The bill will probably be paid. The appointment will probably be remembered. Still, the body does not stand down. It keeps a little of itself in reserve for the call that may come, the error that may appear, the reaction that may need managing, the demand that may have been missed. It learns to live as if the next thing has already begun before this thing is finished. That is the exhaustion. Not simply busyness, not simply anxiety, not simply distraction. The fatigue comes from a life held continuously in pre-response. Even rest begins to carry the posture of readiness. A person sits down and immediately thinks of what sitting down must repair. Recovery becomes another assignment. Silence becomes something to use well. A free hour becomes a resource to allocate efficiently or waste guiltily. The body is no longer allowed to stop without explaining what stopping is for. And still the explanation would be incomplete. Because people are not foolish for preparing. They are not weak for remaining available. They are not merely duped because they check the message, refresh the portal, set the reminder, soften the sentence, save the file twice, wake early, plan ahead, stay reachable, or imagine consequences before they arrive. Often they are trying to keep something fragile from breaking. A job, a child, a relationship, a body, a visa, a tenancy, a future that has already become too narrow to leave unattended. That is why the arrangement is so difficult to refuse. It borrows the language of care and places it inside systems that never stop asking for more care. It borrows the discipline of survival and turns it into permanent readiness. It borrows love, fear, responsibility, professionalism, prudence and hope, then threads them through procedures that cannot finally be satisfied. So the person continues. They check again, they prepare again, they promise themselves it is only for now, but now keeps widening. Late at night, someone sits at a kitchen table, staring at a laptop screen without typing. The document is finished. The email could be sent. There is nothing meaningful left to improve. Still, they remain there, rereading the same paragraph, moving the cursor across sentences that no longer change. Outside, rain moves softly against the windows. The apartment is quiet except for the low electrical sound of the machine and the occasional shift of pipes inside the wall. Somewhere in another room, a phone charges beside a bed. A calendar reminder waits for morning. Clothes sit in the washing machine because nobody remembered to move them. A cup of coffee has gone cold beside the sink. Nothing dramatic is happening, yet the whole structure is present. A finished document that cannot feel finished. A message not yet sent because its consequences are still being rehearsed. A body sitting in silence, trying to reduce the future before the future has appeared. Eventually, the person closes the laptop, not completely. For several seconds, the screen remains faintly illuminated in the dark room before sleeping fully. The light stays there a little longer than expected, then disappears. The apartment returns to ordinary silence, rain easing, pipes settling, a neighbour laughing briefly through the wall, then stopping. For a moment, nothing seems governed at all. That is what makes the moment linger. Not because it explains everything, because it does not. Because the mechanism continues after interpretation has finished with it. Tomorrow morning, the phone may brighten the room before thought fully returns, or the battery may die overnight. The anticipated message may never arrive. Someone may sleep through the alarm and discover that the world continued without the preparation they believed necessary. Perhaps nothing meaningful will happen for weeks except maintenance nobody remembers afterward. Coffee reheated, passwords reset, weather checked, calendar adjusted, notifications cleared, clothes moved from washer to dryer to chair instead of cupboard. An unfinished email reopened 3 times without new sentences appearing. The future still arrives early most days, but not always as rehearsed. Sometimes it arrives as acceleration, sometimes as suspension, sometimes as another form to complete, sometimes as no reply, sometimes as a child sleeping through school notifications because future planning has started to feel irrelevant, sometimes as a warehouse worker reheating instant noodles before another night shift while an executive listens to a podcast about mindful leadership in an airport lounge. The same historical moment continues distributing different futures across different bodies. Some people inhabit optimization, some inhabit survival, Some inhabit administrative waiting rooms where nothing arrives except delayed paperwork and fluorescent light. Somewhere between waking and reaching for the phone again, anticipation will begin reorganizing itself around possibilities still only partly visible, even to the people living inside them. Outside, morning traffic will already be moving toward destinations people prepared for yesterday.